I've seen people in this country get in the weirdest fights as they try to define their family, all the way to like getting a divorce over. They can't figure out whether they should take the name of the dad's family or the name of the mom's family. I saw people get a fucking divorce over that.
We now bring you Enter the Freud.
This is for entertainment purposes only. It is no way medical advice.
I was just talking to my little brother this past weekend, and he's like, yeah, I gotta, because he's 30, late 30s, and he's like, man, I gotta like find a woman and get married and settle down and have kids. Which, him saying, like, that's what every 30-something-year-old dude who is single is saying, you know? It's just like, that's the normal assumption of millions of young men and young, especially even young women.
Yeah.
I'm saying young, but kind of like on the late side of young. And when he said that, I was just like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, yeah, I guess that's what you're thinking. I just had some weird reaction, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Is that what he should be doing? Like, what am I going to say in response to that? And it just was funny because everyone assumes, all right, when you get to be a certain, it used to be like used to be like 22,
yeah.
And then the age has slowly risen, but the assumption is the same. Is like, find a mate, settle down, have kids, and live happily ever after. Like that, everybody who hasn't done that yet is thinking that's like the most important thing they have to do.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know. I wouldn't tell him, no, dude, that's not what you should do. But I also wouldn't say, yeah, dude, that's the... So I was like, fuck, I don't even know what I think about that.
Is that what you said?
Maybe I did end up saying that. At first, I kind of didn't really say anything. And then I just sort of was like, yeah, well, times have changed. I don't know. You know, it's like I didn't really say anything.
Some kind of ambiguous, like, let me try to evade this subject. Which is what pretty much everyone else is going to do, unless you're Jordan, who's going to just be a champion for, all right, get this nuclear family the way that the Huxtables and every other stupid TV show shows the American, like mom, dad, maybe the grandparents, occasionally one uncle, and then that's it, and the kids. That's the fucking family system. And you know, when you mentioned this subject, I was like, shit, dude, there's like the dissolution of the idea of a family system. But in America, as we end up embracing just postmodern ideas, right? Like
right.
All kinds of ideas. And you know, I'm sure throughout just trying to talk about what a family is, the ideas will emerge, right? Like if you just try to figure out like what is a family, and like for example, here's something that's weird: is do you think that I'm part of your family?
Yeah, good question. Most people would say definitely no, but I actually have more. I'm sort of closer to you and have more contact with you and depend on you more than most of my family members.
Yeah, I would absolutely consider you family. And particularly, I've hung out with your son since he's tiny. He kind of knows me as uncle.
Right.
Right? Like, well, I have a real relationship with your son. Right?
Yeah, totally. But by the typical American definition, people would say you and I are not family members.
Yeah.
But then probably in India, you and I probably would be considered sort of family members in India.
Oh, we're in India, we're cousin brothers of some kind.
Right. Right, totally.
Like they have definitions of this kind of an extended family. And I was, you know, I thought about that. Actually, indigenous, when I tried to look up what were the indigenous Americans, or American Indians, whatever you call them, right?
Yeah.
Like how did their family system work? Well, it was very much like India. It's not like it extends so far that it's not only the people who are, like if you're a Sioux Indian, then your identity of family goes from your immediate relatives grandparents, and then all the other tribe members that were in your actual like living village. What I don't think they were called villages, but then it's also all Sioux Indians that have ever lived and are alive today are a part of the identity of the family. That's got to be the biggest family system identity I've heard of.
Yeah.
Right? It goes so much bigger because I've seen people in this country get in the weirdest fights as they try to define their family, all the way to like getting a divorce over they can't figure out whether they should take the name of the dad's family or the name of the mom's family. I saw people get a fucking divorce over that.
Wow.
Right? Like in the pursuit of the definition of what is a family, they got so wrapped up into what are we going to name the family?
Yep.
Like that. What do you think? There's a total range, right? There's the family that has been promoted on TV and movies in America, which is just like, God, I can't even think of all the names of all the shows because mostly they happened in the 80s and 90s. I wasn't even here. But like there's that structure of a family. And then there's all the way pushed forward to like what you and I can imagine 10 years from now, the postmodern family design. Like what?
Well, and sitcoms maybe even reflect that because you're right. The 80s families were like the Cosby Show, that was the Huxtables, and Family Ties, I think that was the Keatons. And there was a bunch of those, and they were all more traditional family. But then eventually the sitcoms that took over was like Friends, and they sort of had a family of 6 single adults. And then The Office became like the most popular show ever, and that was just a bunch of coworkers who kind of, you know... and it sort of shows that evolution of what a family is.
Yes, it totally does. But then again, there's like Jordan is gonna have a giant fucking seizure about this conversation and say like, wrong, shut up you two, like you don't know the true family is we must preserve this original identity of mom, dad, raising the kids. That's the one that is statistically shown to have the best outcome, blah, 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 blah. Right?
Yeah, I heard, I don't know, I forget who it was, but they were talking, because I have the same kind of perspective as you, but then I heard someone give an argument to this Jordan thing is it's like, it's an evolutionary genetic thing. And it's like our ancestors who became passionately defensive of their children, their genes passed on. So all of us have woven into our genes this kind of irrational, tribal, territorial, my gene thing. And this theory, and I think there's some research that shows this, though I don't remember, is that we just have some sense of who has our genes and we become defensive of them. So our children especially, but our siblings also, and even our cousins have some of our genes. So we're like more defensive of those. And so there's this like old biological genetic instinct in us that I think that the Jordan Peterson world, or the kind of red pilly, whatever new men's movement, whatever world that is, they're kind of like, they're really into evolutionary psychology.
Yeah, they do embrace that. And you know what? It's going to be really hard to go against that. And that's what, so if we were to argue against that and say like, we're going to go for like full postmodern inclusivity and and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but let's just say in the future, the government has a mandated, every family must have like the appropriate amount of gay and trans and minorities within each family, right? And so that family is obviously not going to be defined by genetics. So you're just going to have to be grouped. They'll have a system where you go in and the lottery puts you all together, and then you have to move to where you fit within the structure that is exactly the right amount. And that would, we'd produce the most perfect. It goes to the same idea of like this wealth inequality, and we're going to just take away from the wealthy and give, of course, to everyone, so that we solve the distribution of wealth, right? And so in the same way, well, let's just solve this genetic discrepancy as well. And no more of this guarding, and then those with the high IQs just keep going and building, and you select another one. And then if you're attractive and you select another, no, you don't get to do that anymore. All the kids are made in a lab, and then like just move forward towards like what's wrong? Is there anything wrong with what I'm saying?
Okay, but
why did you laugh? Why did you laugh?
Well, it sounds actually like a good TV series for Netflix. That's how I kind of wanted to watch that show and see what the fuck would happen. It's kind of like, sort of has like a Handmaid's Tale sort of feel to it. There's a book. Fuck, what is the book called? There's a book, I forget what it's called, that kind of sort of has that world. It's very fascinating. Okay, but that's that absurd world you just painted. That sort of gives a critical perspective on this more intense egalitarian thing. The Jordan Peterson is sort of the opposite of that, of like, fuck that, no, we're evolutionary beings, so we have a right to want to have sex with the hottest person, and we have a right to want to work harder, and if you work harder, you should be allowed to like have more money.
Yeah.
But there's some other different world I think that I'm in, and I think that you're in, which is because for me, family, I don't really have that. Like, I have a pretty big family here in Minneapolis, and I feel more connected to you and to my close friends than to nearly all of my family members. And if I was gonna, if there was Armageddon or the world ended and I was gonna try to survive with a few people, I'd rather try to survive with you than these random cousins who I don't really have connection to, even though I share genes with them in a way I don't with you. And I'm surprised everyone doesn't fucking feel that way.
Dude, maybe.
So I was just saying that this defining your family as your friends rather than as your genes seems super obvious to me, but I don't know why it's not obvious and compelling to everyone. Maybe it's because most people don't have fucking close friends. Remember when we were looking at that research?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that's true, because I was just thinking about that. Like, today I have to hear back from the vet about my dog. When I got him back from the dog sitter, he had some super weird compulsion to drink water like it was crack, and then just pee. And I was like, oh my God, what is he doing? And so it's either a urinary tract infection, or he's dying from something, or he has diabetes.
Oh.
Right? Or he has diabetes. And if he has diabetes, I have to inject him with insulin. And the vet was like, that's a pretty big expense. And so, I just want to talk to you about that. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Dude, if he needs his fucking insulin. And then I was thinking to myself, is he part of my family? Is Romeo part of my family? And I'm like, absolutely. Like,
right.
Okay. So then we've just pushed that boundary a little bit further. And then I thought to myself, like, well, what if I found out one of my friends that I haven't spoken to in quite some time was in, like, I hear from him and he's like, oh, dude, I got this diabetes and I can't afford the insulin, blah, blah. I would fucking get him insulin.
Right, totally.
Even though, because once upon a time, he was my family.
Yep.
Right? And I mean this only about like I think if one of my friends from college contacted me and was like that, I'd be like, yeah, I'll contribute to your GoFundMe, but I'm not going to pay for the whole thing. But if it was like one of these real connections that drift into, there's an identity.
Yeah.
Like, do you have an undefined identity in there also? Is that what you're talking about?
I think we're talking about who do we consider family, and why do you and I consider our friends family and some people don't? And this thought occurred to me because I noticed, like, I don't know, a few minutes ago I noticed it, and I notice it oftentimes when I'm talking about how friends become family, there's some part of me that there's like a little pain or sadness, or some part of me wants to cry or something. That frequently comes up when this topic comes up for me. And so here's what I'm speculating that's about, is that at some point for me, and I'm guessing at some point for you, in childhood, there was this sense of like, oh, fuck, I can't necessarily rely on my family. Oh, but I can rely on my friends.
Yeah.
And that, I think the pain thing is that it's painful to not have your family to rely on. And then it feels really good to rely on friends, but it's sort of some bittersweet thing there. And it kind of makes me feel a little sad or something when I think about that.
Oh.
And so maybe people like you and me, because of whatever childhood circumstances, we glommed on to like our buddies as our new family, that we're different than in adults and more people. Because I thought of this story. I worked with this guy for a long time. We became really good friends. I totally considered him family in the same way we're talking about. And then he kind of backstabbed me in a certain way. And it really was fucking painful. And he did it just like for business, money-making kind of reasons, you know?
Oh.
And he totally just like threw our friendship away, and it just was really awful. And it like didn't make sense to me. It fucked me up, because to me, we were like family. But clearly to him, we weren't. And I know him really well. And his childhood growing up, he didn't have any bros and wasn't tight with male buddies.
Oh.
And so I think that's the reason why he would do that. Whereas I never in a million years would have thought of doing that.
So are you saying that he maybe broke code?
Yes, he broke code because he didn't know the code. Because when he was growing up, he didn't have this like bro buddy family thing that you and I had.
But so what, like, I've never heard Jordan talk about this, but, and I hate to pick on him and I'll stop, but like this idea of extended family, even beyond the borders of like uncles and aunts and cousins, and right, like that, this way different idea that I guess we're calling more of a broism, right? Like that is that has to be a new. No. This must be like something that has always occurred. But like,
yeah, in tribes, where the tribes were all your family.
Yeah, in tribes, as we define through indigenous cultures, right? Like you and your hunting party and your whatever, the whole fucking thing moves together, and you
yeah, and the whole tribe is your family. But then maybe kind of this like American manifest destiny thing, where it'd be like a actual father, mother, and kids, and that little nuclear family would go out into the I forget the word, where they'd go out and homestead some land and be farmers, and then their family just became that like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 person nuclear family. And I think that became the norm in America, and the tribe was gone, and now family became this little survival unit of the nuclear family with the whole farming thing.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe when the bro culture died.
Yeah, the death of bro culture, which that goes back to your buddy, your coworker, who then somehow doesn't know the code. So somehow he doesn't know the code, and then like if this thing does gradually disappear, like say the fear of everyone about all of our kids are digital online, they don't have these connections, they're not fostering this kind of a thing, so then they will in the future react to their relationships the way that this guy did, which is specifically, if I understand you correctly, are you saying that he somehow didn't understand that you have to be loyal and somehow like reciprocal in the relationship, even though, like, look, I see people all the time who end up with weird situations where their own brother, actual fucking brother, will then diverge from their relationship based on some fucking business thing, just like you said.
Totally, dude.
Not only a business bro, right? Like you had a business bro, and then it breaks away, and sometimes in real, like, biological blood brother, actually, like, that thing happens. But then again, other than that, no, I was about to just rush past this. I want to hand the ball to you, because I'm on to the next idea.
Well, so like when a sibling relationship dies because of something, which also happens, that just makes me think of during COVID, my family and tons of people I know's families, relationships in their families died because whether they believed in wearing masks or not.
Oh my God.
So that's relevant, or just like whether you're a Trump supporter or not.
Yeah, but
you know?
What is that? What the fuck is that? Like, how can that cause the death of a relationship just because of the idea of, oh yeah, my brother is now totally into Trump? And it's like,
right.
Like, who gives a fuck? Like, he could also suddenly be into ballet. Is that going to really upset you? Like, yeah, he keeps going to New York and he goes to the ballet and you're like, fuck that guy. Like, what?
Well, I think that part of the answer to that question is that politics, like red state, blue state, right, left, has become like our new tribal identity.
Okay.
But not for me, but for most fucking idiots out there. It's like, what, are you a red state or a blue state? And I won't be friends with you if you're not the right color.
Yeah. But which is so strange because like simultaneously we are supposed to be headed towards the most inclusive and the most equitable time in history. That's what the message is. But then suddenly there's a breakdown of that. And then I wonder, what is the fucking consequence of that? Like, is there a consequence, or is this breakdown specifically the breakdown of family based on identity? I think this is where we've ended up. Breakdown of family based on identity externalized by group identities. Political or minority or sexual or religious and whatever it is, that identity. Then what do you think the benefit of that is? And then I'll tell you the benefit of the other way,
my guess is the benefit. Oh, I don't know about the word benefit, but my guess is the reason that people are doing that goes back to this conversation we've had before about when you're in a cult, the most powerful way to stay in a cult is to identify the outsiders who don't believe what you believe and they're bad. And so I identify with this cult. And just the identity with the group is just it's this tribal identity. It's the most powerful thing. And currently the most powerful tribal identity in America is red state, blue state.
So are you saying that developmentally or psychologically that all human beings need this, that it's like an essential nutrient, and so then that is why they cling to this new form of identity? Is it possible? Is that possible?
I want to say it a little bit different. I do think all humans have the tendency, but I think it's possible to, if your psychological development matures high enough, you can kind of outgrow the ability, the tendency to just sink into simplistic identity. Like here's a good example. I like the Vikings because I live in Minnesota, so I'm a Vikings fan.
Yeah.
And then occasionally I'll meet someone who's a Packers fan, who's like our enemy. And I can get into the Packers suck, and I can get into that fight, but I don't really believe in it.
Okay.
But I can really get in it and get riled up. But the whole time I know that it's just a fucking game, you know.
Yeah.
And then when we say, okay, pause the game pauses, and now I can laugh at how stupid I was for thinking the Vikings are so great. But there's some people that can't do that. They actually fully slip into Vikings identity and actually literally hate Packers people and won't hang out with Packers fans, you know? And so I just think it's the same thing with politics.
Well, okay. So if it's so easy for some people to end up in these kind of exclusive identities rather than inclusive, right? They're like, hey, I'm this people or these are my people. And then everyone else is I was just thinking, it was really weird that when I was a kid, there was this weird practice in the cult that I was in that, like, if you as a child started to have issues like behavioral problems within your family, the guru dude would just be like, "Oh, you now live with this other family."
Oh.
Right? The kid they would literally send the kid to go live with another family. And I remember at one point, this girl who was like my sister's age came to live with us.
Oh.
And I just thought, oh, how strange. Like, she now lives with us. Where are her parents? You know?
Oh.
And they were like, oh, her parents are over there, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. She came and lived with us. And then at some point, like, left. And I just remember she was fantastic to tease and torment. Just like, I grew up with a lot of girls, and so I like to to hassle them because I was a boy and different, you know. So
yeah.
It was just like a strange game. And
Yeah.
then one point, I had such bad ADD when I was a little guy that they sent me to go stay with a different family.
Oh, how long did that last?
It was just over one, like, there's this festival called Solstice. And so there was like a winter solstice that went for like 2 weeks, and then a summer solstice that went for like a month in the summer. The winter solstice was celebrated in Florida, where I lived, and the summer solstice was in New Mexico. And so during that winter solstice, I stayed with this other family, and this guy, the kid was, they only had one kid, and he was 1 year older than I was. And he's a great kid. But they had really fucking rigid rules. I remember thinking that was so odd. I had to refer to the dad and mom with this really weird Indian name.
Yeah.
Like Mataji and Pitaji.
Huh.
Like and I couldn't call them by like mom or dad or whatever their names were. They were like, no,
Right.
You will call me this. They had this like
Wow.
super rigid structure. And I was like, whoa, I guess.
And how did that work for you living with them for that period?
I think it fucking worked.
Hmm.
Like, I think it actually subdued some of my activated ADHD, which now this is a super controversial idea. I've never thought of this prior to this day, right now, right? I didn't even remember this until we just were talking. But obviously something about my family system was activating this thing, other than people would say, but it's a genetic disorder. And it's like, yeah. I get that I'm atypical in my neural structure. I get that. Right. But like the specific behavioral, like I had I exhibited this kind of hyperactivity that was paralyzing. Like it must have been alarming to look at. And so I would get so wound up that I would literally freeze and shake.
And then something about living with a different family for a month, like, shifted you, and it helped it.
It definitely helped it. And I wasn't medicated, and I went on with my life, and that stage of activated thing is back there. It's really fucking amazing to think about. I would never recommend this treatment. It's a terrible idea, except there is a really unique, it's somewhere in Scandinavian country where when you get out of the hospital for a psychiatric condition, you go and stay with another family. You don't go back to your other family. And they've been doing this for, I don't know, 100 years.
It makes complete sense to me.
Have you heard about that?
No, I've never heard about it, but it totally makes sense to me, because I see so many kids with various behavioral problems, and they come in, and then I meet with the kids and the parents, and I can totally see how the family dynamic has like slipped into this fucking shitty rut.
Yeah.
And to get them out of the rut but stay together is really hard. But if you just like rip it apart and stick that guy over here and this guy over here, and I could see how that would really shift things up and smooth the rut out so they wouldn't get slipped right back into it.
Well, you could just imagine with family systems theory, right? Where obviously that person is the identified patient.
Right.
And everyone becomes invested in them maintaining the role of the identified patient. Because if they are no longer the patient, then they all will have to confront their own neuroses and the and the interpersonal tensions. Like a lot of the interpersonal tensions in families are held at bay while there's an identified patient, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so it's strange, because then that also keeps the patient exhibiting the behaviors. Now, that's a really controversial idea, except in like all three forms of family systems theory talk about that in different ways.
No, I totally think that's true.
Right.
Okay, but hold on. Let's bring us. We've gone massively far, digressed to this topic, and then this, and
where
this,
the fuck did we end up?
And we don't have too much time, so let's bring it back and let's really try to like hammer right on the core of it. If you had a cousin who was 34 and he was like, "Porn, dude, I feel like I gotta meet a woman and settle down and have kids. What do you think?" What would you say to him?
Dude, that is a really tough one. I would be like, "All right, bro, time to do some really important mate selection." I think that would be the most important thing, is like, whoever you end up having a kid with, try to pick somebody who has attributes that are going to help you guys through the part when it works out and when it doesn't. Because I think it's inevitable that these partnerships are increasingly going to split up into this other family system that has a different house for mom and a different house for dad.
Yeah, totally. I agree. The Jordan Peterson, that whole world, and it's Jordan Peterson and it's a bunch of red pill people and maybe the whole political right-wing red state people, all are like, "That's awful, porn. No, we have to fight against that. We have to like get back to family values, and the marriage vow has to really be until death do us part." And Jordan's main point, which I think is a good one, is for the benefit of raising children. And Jordan got into this phase where he was interviewing all these people, showing how children, if when there was a divorce, kids didn't see their dads hardly as much, and that was really not good for them.
Yeah.
Jordan was really obsessed with that for a while, and it's a really convincing argument. But anytime I was listening to that, I'm like, I got divorced, and like I'm with my son insane amounts. You know?
Yeah.
And so Jordan's whole critique, I feel like, doesn't apply to me and my son.
It doesn't apply.
You know?
No, it doesn't.
So it's like, so it doesn't have to be that divorce equals kids don't see their dads. equals kids behave shitty. That doesn't have to be the equation. And that's the only equation Jordan was ever looking at.
Right. And what was the other, what was I just saying? Because as you talked about that, I ended up into another cavern. But but it's so important. This second thing I have to bring is really important. But I want to go back to. Do you remember what did I say that caused you to go back to this Jordan thing?
That you were going to tell your little cousin he should select a good mate.
Oh, okay. So what I meant specifically about that is like select a mate who would then have personality traits that were going to really help them end up in a cooperative, which would mean that look for a person who is
mature,
kind, generous, these kinds of qualities, instead of just like your type of tall with big tits or whatever your fucking thing is that you're looking for.
Totally.
Right? Like, I want her to be educated from Stanford and then and hot Latina. And I'm like, oh, fucking good one, dude. Yeah, okay. You can have that one. And then it's like, well, is she does she play well with others? Or is she like this guy that your work bro that is going to eventually fully destroy the relationship out of his own need to grovel for his own pieces? Is that what's going to happen? Because if that's who you end up with, if that's your selection, then we already know the outcome. It's going to be like eternal conflict over the raising of the child, and then the division of assets, and on and on and on. Right. So that would be my suggestion to the person.
Yeah.
But while you were explaining Jordan's concept, the strange radioactive wave that hit me was like, wait a second, look at what happens in these families that where you're connected to the person, and then you dedicate all this time and energy and then resources, and then that person ends up with more possibility, more potential. They inherit more. They inherit more time and investment from people who care. So they are worth more in this world, right? In this current structure of the economy within capitalism, they can go and earn more. They're fucking worth more.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. And it's families who do that then just continue on this path. And I don't know why I'm going down, because it kind of goes up where you just amass more and more and more. And then there's a lot of people who are very angry about that. Mm-hmm. They don't like this idea of a family. They want to destroy that family that continues to then pay attention to. This is insane to think about, but it's real. It goes to my dystopian idea that the government would then do a lottery and then select people and put them all within this exact right amount, and then make sure that we don't have an unequal distribution of wealth and intelligence and looks and athleticism. Nope. No. You can't have that. Because some families, they're fucking unbelievably athletic. And then they marry another. Yeah. They keep marrying athletic people.
Yeah.
You end up with these fucking Olympian Ironmen. What is that? And then totally. You get other ones who are just intellectually obsessed. And so then they end up just like that. Do you think in the future that do you think society could ever go so far as to then mandate that we don't do that anymore?
Well, that question ultimately boils down to a red state versus blue state question. And I guess if I try to really simplify, I think we need to balance between allowing some level of competition, survival of the fittest, motivation to climb to the mountain, and that's the red state thing. We need to allow some of that, and we need to integrate some level of let's try to even the playing field every so often to a certain degree. That those two things essentially just need to be balanced. You need to try to integrate the red and the blue impulse. Because you don't want it just to be so much that someone gets all the power, then has everyone else enslaved, and then is tricky and keeps them enslaved. Obviously, you don't want that. But obviously, you don't want this this thing you're saying where like you're told, Porn, you have to have sex with that ugly lady because we're trying to keep the genes balanced, you know?
That's got to be the craziest thing. But then it's like, well, whoa. What is that called? There's a name for that when you do
genetic control.
Yeah, but normally it was like the Nazis were into this.
Yeah, it's a thing when they're trying to make the ultimate thing. That has a certain name, in which we talked about this recently.
Yeah,
I forget. But this thing we're talking about is the opposite of that. It's like trying to level the genetic playing field where you're forced to have sex with that ugly lady to keep everything balanced.
Yeah, well, but it's so it would go way more than that, right? Because we would do like a 20 to 50 trait qualities, and then try to figure this out. The only civilization I ever heard that did this was the indigenous people of Australia, and the reason why this is probably one of like I went to this school over there to surf, and then I ended up like at this really odd school where they had one of the best fucking psychologists ever, which is just randomly there. And then this anthropologist guy who was so crazy, he would take us out into the various jungly areas and then show us and talk to us all about the indigenous people. And so check this out. They would do a type of selection where if your shin bones were this long and the other person's shin bones were short, then that was one criteria of how you could marry that person. If your hair was straight and the other one was curly, then that was an okay marriage as well. But if you both had curly hair, no fucking way. And the reason why they did this was to control for genetic incest.
Yes, right.
Right? Because their tribes were so small and trapped up that they had these really specific rules of how it is.
Yep.
And so the last two indigenous human beings in Australia were found because they ran away. They both had curly hair and they fell in love. It's like an amazing love story. And I saw the fucking video of these two and it was so amazing. They were the last, they had never seen civilized people. They'd never seen any modern existence. And they filmed this as the truck drives up. And because their world is so full of just like the magical nature, they don't see the truck.
Wow.
They can't see it.
Wow.
They can't. And then this is the tragedy of it all is these idiots decide, oh, one of them is hurt. And so the guy's hurt and the girl goes and collects food and brings it back to him. And they're like, oh, we got to bring them into civilization. So they put them, they take them out of the thing and they die instantly.
Oh my God.
I know. Dude, it makes me want to fucking cry.
Wow. What a story. I'd never heard that before.
It's fucking insane. Like, but it just goes to, dude, I don't know why that just remembering that moved me so much in context to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like like the selection and the fact that they fell in love and ran away. And like, imagine in this world that I'm depicting where the government mandates who you're with and who is your family. And then, and they're all, and you're given names like A2135. That's your family's name. And like,
yeah, totally.
Like people are going to fucking run away and do shit.
Yeah.
Like, Oh, what a strange end to an episode.
That was fucking awesome, dude.